Got it. Beautiful. Beautiful. Welcome, everyone. It's 6 o'clock on Monday night, and you're listening to the 67th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net, Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels, a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Age Out Angels provides one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to survive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face if they don't have a proper safety net. This program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben is on the big board tonight, along with Robin producing the show. Season's greetings to both of you. It's always so good to see you both in the conductor's chairs, and thank you so much at home for tuning in. We've put together what I hope you will find to be an insightful and compelling view of the child welfare system. So get ready, because tonight on the Radio Hour, we're closing the year on a pretty serious note, and it's not going to be pretty. We're going to talk about how a once great urban area gets reduced to a ghetto and how that can be reversed. This is going to be a show you won't forget, and you simply must share it with everyone. So please, if you're listening on Hamilton Radio right now, just open up a browser and find us on Facebook using my name, Greg Rapport. And hit that share button, please, or even better, email your whole address book. Tell everyone to go to www.hamiltonradio.net, Channel 2. Tell the world what we're doing here. The issue we're discussing tonight is something that must be heard. It's a truth that has to be heard by everyone in order for change to occur. And what's amazed me in the last month or so of my research on this is how many people don't know about it. I think that's incredible. If you're watching on Facebook right now, you can see that sitting next to me is Rev Eric Dobson. I'm going to introduce him formally in just a minute. But I've wanted him to be on the show for a long time because this is something that he understands and can share with all of us. So it's going to be a hard lesson tonight, but don't keep it private. We need to get this out to more than the 40,000 people who regularly listen to this program. So please hit that share button. While you're doing that, let me remind you that we're on every Monday from 6 to 7 with the Age Out Angels Radio Hour, and we have a great lineup of guests coming up, but not until January 7th, because we're going to take 2 weeks off. Next week would be New Year's Eve. The week after that, next week it would be Christmas Eve. The week after that would be New Year's Eve. So we're not going to have a show, and you're not going to listen to it if we did, because you'll be out doing the things that you're supposed to be doing then. So not until January 7th. We're taking 2 glorious weeks off. January 7th, Catherine Mitch from Literacy, New Jersey will be here. On January 14th, attorney and Foster alumni Nicole Kilberg will be here with an incredible story you won't want to miss. And on January 21, a well-known personality in the Trenton area and also a radio host in his own right, Jacques Howard, talks very candidly about his view about life in the community and how to improve it. So be sure to tune in every Monday at 6 p.m. for our unfiltered look at the child welfare system. This is where you come to get the whole truth. And I promise you, I will bet you whatever you like that you will not hear on the nightly news tonight what we're going to be discussing here. This is the only place you're going to hear this. I noticed that Peg Gould is on the phone, and please ask her to hold for just a minute, okay? Peg, if you're listening to me, don't go away. So listen, you can call in tonight, as Peg just did. The number is 609-807-2492. You can also write any comments in the comments field on my Facebook page. It's been like a strange week, I have to tell you. This time of the holidays when you want everything to sort of be uplifting. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that the last 2 children that I either met or learned about, 3, there was another one today, who are aging out of foster care, are aging out without a transition plan. You know, and so I had to do a little bit of research, and it turns out that it's not like an actual law that they have to have that. It's really sort of DCP&P policy to give youth a transition plan. But I have to tell you, I'm batting 1,000 here. 3 for 3. The last 3 children that I spoke to are aging out, you know, without a transition plan. And so, you know, there are things that are disturbing me, and we talk a lot about things that need improvement. So I could sit here and I could say, well, you know, what we need is DCP&P has to make a transition plan, and that's an improvement. And it is. It's correct. It's an improvement, but it's a Band-Aid, right? And you could even broaden the issue a little bit, and you could say, well, we need better schools, you know, and we need more community policing, and we need a whole bunch of things that are all very important improvements, but they're all Band-Aids. And all of the things that you find when you work in child welfare all come down to trauma. Children are such victims nowadays. It's just mind-boggling. They're victims of the insanity of some of the homes that they're born into. They're victims of the environment that they live in. You know, they're just victims. And what we're going to talk about tonight is not a Band-Aid. What we're going to talk about tonight is a root cause. It's, you know, you say these children grow up in this terrible environment. Well, you know, then it gets argued, why don't they do something to change it? Okay. You have to understand there's a depth that created this environment, right? Yeah. There's a depth that goes back 40, 50 years, right? That created this environment. So everyone, say hi to, on that happy note, say hi to Reverend Eric Duncan. Dobson. I've been saying Duncan all day. Please forgive me. Reverend Eric Dobson. He is from the Fair Share Housing Center. And the root cause that I just talked about, we'll get into in a second, but it's the reason the organization that he represents exists. You know, without the nonsense that happened 50 years ago, none of this would be necessary. And, you know, so that's kind of how it is. So, Reverend Dobson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg, for having me.
It's great to have you here. I met you at the New Jersey CPAC, the Child Placement Advisory Council, right? The New Jersey CPAC, Partners Moving Forward, right? Partners Moving Forward, and you know, the purpose of that was for us all to get together and exchange ideas and you know, get to know what each other does. And when we started talking about housing, it changed my whole perspective. And I'm sure I speak for every white person in the world when I when I say, except for the ones who made, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, they knew what they were doing, right? But I'm sure I speak for every other white person in the world.
Greg said that, not me.
Yes, no, I take ownership. It's okay. That is what we're going to talk about tonight. Was simply not known. In the white community. Like you say this to a black person and they go, yeah, you know, sure. But it was not known. Not only was this not known, but it was sold to us in a completely different light. Okay? So I'm going to leave that hanging right there. And just let me back up a notch here. Give us the sort of 30-second overview of what the Fair Share Housing Center is.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say that the great work that you guys do in aging out and what's happening in our child welfare system is a shame. I think you judge every society by the way they treat their children and their elderly. So I'll let America be the judge of how we treat our children and our elderly in this country. So Fair Share Housing Center came out of a historical zoning law that happened in Mount Laurel when Mount Laurel was using its zoning powers back in the 70s. And most of New Jersey used their own local zoning powers for specific things, but this particular situation, they was using their zoning powers to exclude minorities from staying in that town. And so there was a group, you know, during that time, New Jersey was sprawling out, building single-family McMansions. And it was a group of African Americans who was living in Mount Laurel at that time, actually since Reconstruction. So they were living in housing, substandard housing, living in converted chicken coops, chicken coops and stuff like that.
And excuse me 1 second, but just for our listeners across the country, we're talking about a small town back then in New Jersey called Mount Laurel, New Jersey, and it was right out. It is right outside of Camden.
Yes.
Right. That's sort of the suburb of Camden, New Jersey, which is right across the river from Philadelphia.
Right, right.
Okay.
So South Jersey,
Right.
Burlington County, right next to Camden County. So these counties and towns run together. And so the folks, that was during a time when the suburban sprawl was happening, and they wanted to build, create these McMansions. And these folks had been living there since Reconstruction. So they was basically using their zoning powers to exclude these folks. And they said, listen, we want to build some apartments for our community, and the town wouldn't allow it. And they were using zoning to do so. Mm-hmm. So this got argued all the way up to different court cases that was happening about the situation. So the mayor met in Jacob's Chapel AME Church in Mount Laurel and told the folks, if you can't afford to live here, then you just have to leave. So fortunately, New Jersey Supreme Court heard the case, and it was argued, and the plaintiffs, Southern Burlington County's NAACP, represented these groups, and three of the attorneys on that case. One of the attorneys named Peter O'Connor. They won the case, and the law says each municipality must zone to adopt affordable housing.
Right.
So
Okay.
Peter
All right.
O'Connor founded us out.
All right, so we're going to go back in time now to the point where they were doing this creative zoning, right? Creative zoning. What did that do to Camden?
Oh yeah, it made significant inroads because prior to then there was a significant amount of white flight, what is called white flight, when folks in Camden, believe it or not, the city of Camden was predominantly white. And as things start to transpire,
Absolutely.
industry started to move out. They started moving out into the suburbs, so the people started moving out of the suburbs as well. Now, white flight is orchestrated by realtors, banking, investments. So, of course, you have a black family move into Camden. So, white flight is the realtors start doing what's called block busting, telling folks you better leave now because the blacks are coming, right? So people were moving, whites were moving out of the Camden and into the surrounding suburbs, first suburbs, Pennsauken, Cherry Hill, and then further out Mount Laurel. So they started, as businesses and industry started to move out, so it left Camden desolated with lack of investment, lack of jobs, lack of tax revenue. So that's what was happening in Camden.
Right.
So it was orchestrated primarily by banking and real estate.
Making fortunes.
Making a killing.
Making absolute fortunes. And if you think about the cyclical nature of some of this stuff, when Camden becomes decimated and its property values plummet, right? You can swoop right back in and pick up those properties for a song.
That's what's happening in most of the urban regions across the country. So you disinvest, devalue land, come back and pick up that land for a cheap price, and then that land starts to increase in value. That's called gentrification. So you're actually leaving a community desolate for nothing to get it down to its worst possible value so you can come back in and take the property.
Take advantage of some federal subsidies along the way, right?
All of this is sanctioned by federal government and tax dollars and federal housing policy. So
it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So that's this whole piece of creating wealth for white Americans. The whole myth of pull yourself by your own bootstraps of something that typically you hear white people say, "Why they just don't work hard and pull themselves up by their own bootstraps?" Well, what happened is when you don't have any feet to put in the boots when they've been cut off by the government, then you can't.
I say this they'd love to, but the boots are sunk in lead.
Yeah.
That's what the problem is. You mire this because go back to something that you said just a few sentences ago. When that happens in the urban area and white flight takes place and people move out and the property is devalued, and you have fewer tax ratables, right, in that city. All right, so then you say, we need better schools, right? Gets back to the thing I said at the very outset of the broadcast. We need better schools. We need more police. And every time you say something like that, there is someone who shoots it down in a heartbeat simply by saying, where's the money going to come from?
Right.
Where's the money going to come from? And then, this drives me crazy, man. It perpetuates further because that urban center becomes the place where the nonprofits, my organization, right, we come in, and we don't pay taxes, to anybody. But that's where we are. We're in the urban center. So if you're desolate, if you're out there in Mount Laurel trying to sleep in a car or something like that, you're way better off to bring your act into the city, because you might get some social services there. You might get a rescue mission or a soup kitchen, or something like that. So it just drives the city into deeper and deeper.
Yeah, and it does drive, and these subsidies, all the tax revenue that the city of Camden and most of our urban cities had, went out to create the infrastructure for the suburbs for white folks. So those tax revenues didn't just leave the city and leave the city desolate. It went to creating the suburbs. So tax revenue, tax incentives, tax policy help orchestrate and create the suburbs while disinvesting in black communities.
I want to take a second, and I know Pam Gold has been waiting on the telephone, and I just want to give a minute and let Pam talk about what she wants to talk about and give everyone a chance for the guilt to sink in. So if you have Pam there, please send her through.
It's Peg, Greg.
I call you Pam. I'm calling the Reverend Duncan instead of Dobson. I think I have seasonal affect disorder. That's what it is.
Your gifts under any Christmas tree would have somebody else's name on too.
I just need an excuse. What can I tell you? So what's on your mind tonight, Peg?
I just had to call first. I want to say thank you again, Greg, for letting me come on last night, and I wanted to give an update about my out-of-school youth program. In the week since I was in there, we actually had one of our youth complete our entire program. He got his high school diploma in less than 60 days with our program.
Wow.
And he has now in the process of securing his funding to be able to go free of charge to commercial driver license school, CDL school.
Oh, okay. So that's something he'll actually be able to make a living from.
Oh, absolutely.
On the other
I
hand.
have another young female in the program, and she will complete everything within 90 days.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, I'm so glad you called, Peg, because I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show or not, but I needed some good news.
Yes, I did hear that.
Yeah.
But this is what we're doing. We're trying our best to give the best opportunities to as many people as possible, young, old, in between, whatever, people who have kind of fallen on difficult situations, whether it's between like the strange redistricting that you're talking about right now, or whether it's through life events or whatever. There are caring people out there that just are running quality programs, good opportunities, and if we're all working together, then somehow I believe that our little corner of the world is going to be a better place. And the people who come to us in need really deserve that, and that's what drives us every single day, Greg.
That's a beautiful thought, Peg. I'm going to take that with me into Christmas. How about that?
Well, and you should, because you are doing wonderful work. So,
thank you.
And you too, Reverend.
Thank you.
So enjoy a blessed holiday season, and I will call back in the new year.
I'll look forward to it, Peg. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The amazing thing about that she was talking about is when young people finish, because what I've seen is the effects of that trauma that they suffer, and lead poisoning, things like that, have a physiological effect.
Absolutely.
That kind of they're hard to shake. I mean, some can't be fixed, and others sometimes with psychotherapy they can unpack those problems and cope. But finishing, the whole point of finishing, I've seen so many young people start, working towards getting their lives on a track towards success, and just not be able to,
right? Yes.
Not be able to do that. So, all right. So what we were talking about was the systematic dismantling of an urban center to create a housing market just outside of that urban center, and then you could swoop back in, pick up those properties for a song, and use federal dollars to do something with them. Like here's the thing that also kills me. Okay, so you pick up an apartment building in Trenton, right? Is that apartment building getting all fixed up?
No, not at the time, but once you swoop in and grab it, of course you will, and you use tax dollars to do so.
Except, you know what I'm seeing? I'm seeing like all these apartment buildings that they're not spending a dime on. They're just Section 8 housing,
Yeah.
right? And they're taking, and so I saw, what did I see? A 2-bedroom in Trenton where, I probably couldn't live, right? And it was $975 a month. And that was being advertised out like to those of us in the nonprofit world, if we know anybody who needs Section 8 housing, to go in there and try to take advantage of that. So I mean, people are just making money left and right.
Yeah, it's a product of a system that rewards the wealthy. For instance, the whole opportunity zones. I don't know if I guess it's been reported Jared Kushner is using some federal tax dollars to build condos in Long Branch. So
yeah,
I mean,
you know why? Because he needs the money.
Yeah, he needs the money.
He needs the money. He was short last week. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the Mount Laurel Doctrine. Hit that share button. Don't go away. We're going to get to solutions, I promise you.
Good job.
So, all right, so now we'll get in. And we are back. Before we go further, I do need to thank all the people who made donations to Age Out Angels this week. We thank you so very much for your generosity, especially at this time of the year. Special thanks to Arlene Sager and Danielle Taylor, along with all the people who contributed to my birthday Facebook fundraiser.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty cool. I'm actually feeling really good about that. It's really kind of a redistribution of wealth technique. And we did it in a way that put food on the table of some hungry people. A big thanks to an organization called TDI Connect for supplying a laptop for us for a young lady who was in need. They're really a great organization. Look them up on the internet, www.tdiconnect.org. All they do is it's a total volunteer organization, and they accept your old laptop and they refurbish it with a top-notch system. I think he gave away this laptop with an i5 processor, and I thought, wow, that's pretty. That's what and so maybe you want to send them your old machines or something like that, because the only thing they are is beautiful. And by the way, if you have an employee giving fund or matching gifts foundation associated with your place of work, we would certainly appreciate your contacting us and telling us how we can participate in that. Private message me on Facebook or email to greg@ageoutangels.org. And I want to remind everyone that you can donate to Age Out Angels every time you make one of those last-minute purchases from Amazon. All you have to do is designate Age Out Angels to be your Amazon Smile designee. And a portion of your payment will go to Age Out Angels without it costing you 1 penny more. I can make it easy for you to designate Age Out Angels as your Amazon Smile recipient. All you have to do is contact me either via Facebook or directly at greg@ageoutangels.org, and I can send you a link that will take you directly to our designation. And one last note that I want to talk about tonight before we get back to the Reverend is a gentleman that I met at the Trenton Back to School extravaganza last August. Is a fine gentleman named DJ Nasib, and as you can tell, he's a DJ. And he was so wonderful at this. I don't know if people realize one of the challenges of being a DJ is when you're in a place where there are like 3 or 4 generations of people, and everyone wants to hear what they want to hear, and they want to hear it at the volume that they want to hear it at, And Nasib was so cool. In that setting. There were easy 4 generations of people there that day, and he just made everyone happy. And he's going to do something really special for us. We have an event called Youth Connect. It's on January 24th here in Trenton, and it's where we invite homeless youth to come and learn about all the different services that they can take advantage of, and give them some food and stuff, and gift cards, and just try to help them get through another day. Lots of times, in the work that we do, and I have to start to convince donors of this more. You know, they want to see kids go to college and become captains of industry. And that's all lovely, you know, but there's children out there who are homeless. And you know, a good part of what we do is try to just help them get through the next day.
Right.
You know, and see if they can just kind of grow up. We keep them out of jail. We keep them alive. Keep them out of gangs, keep them off drugs. Those are all good things.
Absolutely.
You know?
Wonderful things.
And, you know, donors only see it if they make the cover of Time.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, something that we can talk about on another show and another day. But DJ Nassib, he's a cool guy, and you can call him, actually, at 201-463-6279, 201-463-6279. And when I told him I was going to talk about him tonight, and I said, what do you want me to say? I expected him to come back with, like, you know, an ad, sort of an advertisement for what he was doing. And all he said, all I want to do is create happiness through music. So there it is, DJ Nassib, 201-463-6279. Back with my guest, Reverend Eric Dobson from the Fair Share Housing Center. So the Mount Laurel Doctrine, it's kind of a mitigating factor to this crazy zoning problem, where they basically said to people, if you can't afford to live in Mount Laurel, get out.
Right, exactly.
Okay. And that seemed rude. And that's not Section 8. This is totally different from a federal program.
Exactly. So this is affordable housing. And let me clarify what affordable housing is, because sometimes folks get it confused.
Okay.
So affordable housing based upon the area and medium income, so it's regional based upon the area and medium income, is very low income, housing for seniors, housing for special needs, housing for veterans. So that's all included. And to some homeless housing is all included in the Mount Laurel Doctrine. So towns can zone for housing that includes all of those folks. And in the state where we have the highest property taxes in the nation, lead the nation in foreclosures. So that's, you know, housing is an issue for New Jersey.
Absolutely.
And it's a problem that we can't figure out, because folks, you know, want to have their McMansions. Nothing wrong with rich folks, but there's a constituents of New Jersey who needs housing as well, considering the fact that it's based upon the income. Folks have income. So the perception is affordable housing are people who aren't working. Not only are these people working, but some of them have 2 jobs. So
that's right. That's a total misperception.
Yes,
that's
totally.
Absolutely right. Yep. I got to tell you that I'm sure there are people out there who sort of take advantage or game the system to some degree. I'm sure it happens, you know. But so far, honestly, in the work that I do, I haven't met one. What I've met are people who are working their butts off, just trying to get through to the next day, trying to raise their kids up in an honest environment. And I want the people to know out there, just let me clarify this, because you hear this broadcast tonight especially and you think I'm a total bleeding heart liberal, but I'm not. I'm a damn capitalist. I am. I'm an unabashed capitalist. I'm just, you know, all I'm saying is that everyone deserves a chance.
Right.
You know, everybody deserves a chance to play along in this capitalist society.
So, you know, when let me clarify, the folks who typically game the system are not the folks who are working. It's usually folks who have insides with the townships who can get access to affordable housing for, like, their family members and friends. So those are the folks who game the system. Those who can afford to game the system, who has access to information.
Who are then held up as poster children for why this system shouldn't be helping anyone. Right. Okay. So, all right. So the Mount Laurel Doctrine, which was a response to this zoning issue, that didn't happen overnight.
No, actually, it happened. The case was in 1975. It didn't actually come to fruition until 1983. Then from 1983 to 1985, pretty much the towns refused to do anything. So it had to create a whole Mount Laurel 2. It had to go back to court to create Mount Laurel 2 to have some incentives for towns to do something. So from 75 to like 85, there was a limbo of 10 years. Some things happened and some things didn't happen because towns just refused to do it. And in some ways, towns still try to usurp the law, because it is the law. You know, we are law-abiding citizens until we don't want people moving into our towns.
Right. Yeah.
So
until we have the power to not be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So during that time, there was, you know, court cases after court cases, and finally, through 10 years of lag from 2015 was the latest court case that finally got some real movement when the Supreme Court said enough is enough. the Council of Affordable Housing is not doing its job because at that time, the Christie administration didn't want it to do its job. The Council of Affordable Housing was created by the legislature through the Fair Housing Act to come up with the numbers for each region was supposed to to do. And so that administration wanted to dismantle Mount Laurel and basically made them non-functioning. And so for 10 years, there was missed opportunities for affordable housing in New Jersey. Again, affordable housing for people who are working.
Yeah.
So in 2015, the Supreme Court said, take it back to the trial courts. The number's going to be issued. Every town's going to know their number. And so we're going to move forward with that. And so it's been doing, so far so good. There are still towns who are fighting their obligation, again, because of the perception of what affordable housing is.
Well, does it have teeth? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
When you say this is a law, that's great. But if the law doesn't have teeth, if a township doesn't really face a consequence.
So the good thing about New Jersey, it has the strongest teeth in the country. So we do have a pretty firm, good law that requires town to zone for it. So out of the 300 towns that we've been talking with, we have negotiated and settled with over 250 towns. So over 250 towns.
300 towns you're talking to?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So out of 300, there's at least 250 that have inclusionary zoning in place now.
Now, is this statewide?
This is statewide, yes.
300 towns statewide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was with an organization and we were selling some property. I think it was in Pennington, New Jersey. This was going back a couple of years, and the township was thinking about buying it because they hadn't fulfilled their requirement to. And I don't believe they did actually. I don't think
so.
They
That
did
was
buy it.
Prior to 2008. You could a wealthier town could pay another town to take their allotment of affordable housing.
No.
That was called regional contribution agreements. But Governor Corzine outlawed that the legislator submitted a bill and he signed it into law, outlawing regional contribution agreements.
Unbelievable.
So that anything to get around with creating a more inclusive New Jersey, some towns would do that.
Yeah. And so I hope that people who just heard me say that I'm a capitalist understand that I can sell this to you either from the heart or from your wallet. I can sell it to you either way you want because you know what? For all the people who made a ton of money doing this, I'll bet you're not one of them.
Yeah.
I'll bet you didn't. I'll bet you bought a house and maybe it's above water or maybe it's underwater. I don't know. But the point is that for all the people who made money from this, you're now paying your tax dollars for social services programs. You're paying your tax dollars to incarcerate people. You're paying way more in your tax dollars to now deal with this mess.
The outcomes of social ills, I call this segregation tax. People don't realize how costly segregation is.
It costs a fortune.
And it costs the wealthy as well as the poor. So this is not something that just the wealthy people can pay to not look at folks who are struggling. But you're paying for it, and regardless of what you think, you're paying for it. You know, and so what people have to understand: segregation is the greatest evil that we face in this country, in New Jersey, because the traumatic experience of people growing up in disinvested communities, the social services that have to go into those communities, the poor schools. It's costly to have an uneducated populace, and it's very expensive. So when you do that, then you're building more prisons, you're locking more folks up, and it's not an issue of these are social ills that come out of disinvestment. And so why would you want to have a country that's uneducated, unemployed, disinvested in their own communities, just so you can live out in your so-called somewhat exclusive community, but you're paying a high price for that because you're still paying for those social services going back into those communities, whether you realize it or not. And again, you're living in the highest property tax state in the country. So
that's right. And in the end, we all kind of lose from that because winning is not having a fancy car. Winning is having a great community.
Absolutely.
That's what winning is.
Absolutely.
That's what it looks like. They did something even crazier in Trenton, they did this thing called redlining,
Oh yeah.
right?
Wow.
Redlining, where if they want to kick you out of the urban area faster, the businesses, I mean,
Yeah.
they want to kick the business out, they don't provide loans.
And this,
Right.
it's so funny because we have a populace in our country who just have no understanding of history of their country, the formation of how wealth was created. So we have a country who makes its money off of free labor, slavery, right? And then we have these battles around civil rights. Most folks, black folks get rights, but as they get rights, they're still excluded. Right. So they're fighting in the Civil War. Actually, this is the ironic thing. Like, blacks has fought in every war in this country has ever been. The Revolutionary War, blacks fought in the Revolutionary War for freedom, right? So these folks come home. We go through the Great Depression, right? And the wars happen, but the federal government promises loans for white folks who fought in the war and secure those loans, but won't secure or promise those loans for black folks. So what they did, they highlight areas in the cities where you're not going to get mortgages. This is federal housing policy, while whites could get mortgages and blacks couldn't. So generational wealth could not be created by black folks because that was all created for white folks. This was federal policy. Mm-hmm. And so this is when you talk about, well, why, black folks live in the ghettos. Well, there was an intentional reasoning that the federal government made sure that happened.
Right.
And so when they couldn't get loans, they had to stay in these urban areas, and the suburbs were created for white folks with federal subsidies and federal tax dollars. The middle class was orchestrated, or what we call social engineered, because poor white folks couldn't have money to buy houses either.
That's right.
Because back in those days, you had to have 80% to put down on the house. Mm-hmm. White folks didn't have that money either. But the federal government came up with a system to make sure they can have low down payments, provide funding for putting the houses, but they only did it for white folks and not for black folks.
Yeah. All right, so you ready? Total white people excuse. Here we go. Hold on to you. We were so lied to. We were completely misled, and I can tell you this for a fact because I grew up in that era. I grew up in the '60s when all this was really kind of going down for the first time, and I grew up in Atlantic City.
Oh wow!
Right, and one of the first phrases I learned when it came to civicness was urban renewal. Isn't it a beautiful sound? Urban renewal. We're going to make it all fresh again, like a nice clean bathroom. It's going to be just beautiful. We're going to Mr. Clean this whole thing. So here's what they did. They said, we're going to knock down this whole area south of, I think it was North Carolina Avenue, which they did. They created blocks and blocks and blocks of rubble. All of the people who were there were displaced to what they referred to as the North Side. It was the projects in the North Side, right? So they built projects and they pushed everybody into projects in the North Side. And they said, this is going to be wonderful.
Right.
And we thought, oh, this is good. They're going to make Atlantic City the world's playground again, right? And then year after year, nothing happened.
Right.
Absolutely nothing happened. And social services had to sort of become a part of that, right? So now I went to Atlantic City High School, which I think was 2/3 black at the time. So you'd see the black kids who were getting like a meal and other sort of things that they were getting, and we were like, how come we didn't understand? We were like, how come they're getting it and we don't get it? Like, what am I, chopped liver? And it turns out I am. But none of this was ever brought to light.
Right.
And I wonder how many people are out there listening who never heard this before. Because it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. Ruben's raising his hand over there in the corner. He wants to get, Ruben, 2 minutes to break, okay?
Okay. It'll be real quick. Actually, this is for you, Greg, and Reverend Eric. Do you feel, like you said about the between the redlining between the white and black community, and Greg, you said like this urban renewal. Do you think there's a combination of that again happening again at this time, which they quote as gentrification? Is the same thing?
Yeah,
because when I did the like the Uber and Lyft driving and everything like that, I would pick up white folks and everything, and I'll drop them off in the most neighborhoods in Trenton that I wouldn't even walk down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, you live here? They're like, well, we come from like Middlesex County
Mhm.
or down South, from South Jersey, and they said that, we couldn't afford, to live in those places because the taxes were so high. So Trenton was more affordable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I dropped them off like on like Monmouth Street, and Walnut Avenue in Trenton. Like streets you wouldn't even want to walk down, no
Right.
matter what color you are.
Right.
You
Right.
know, but they, people live, and nicest, people I dropped off, and I'm like, wow, you live down this neighborhood, the most drug infested. Somebody dies like once a week through gunshots, and you live on this street, and even like Hermitage Avenue,
Mhm.
and sometimes in some cases even during the daytime, when I had to walk, I would walk around because I didn't want to walk down the neighborhood myself.
Right.
So are you asking if gentrification
Asian.
pushes the black folks out further?
Yeah, it's just like urban renewal part 2, pretty much, the gentrification.
That's a great question. I mean, if someone is living somewhere and they get pushed out because someone else comes in and pays more.
Yeah, because I
know?
noticed that, like you're saying, like how you said, Reverend Eric, and I think you also pointed out too, Greg. I'm trying to rush the question real quick. Is that with the pushing it with the urban renewal and plus with a combination of redlining, the value of the homes went down.
Right.
And that's the same thing like in Trenton. The houses of the homes went up. My mom even 20 years ago, where I lived was mostly Italian, but now it's all Latino. Where I live in Chambersburg area, and I noticed that the Latinos came in and they bought up a lot of the homes and stores and restaurants. It's like a little Central America where I live at. And but now that they came in, my mom bought her house for like $40,000.
Yeah.
In Trenton back in that. Now the same house, and it still needs some repairs and everything, but still valued at $240,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. So if I was going to come into your neighborhood, and please don't worry, I'm not.
Oh no, it's okay.
But if I was going to come into your neighborhood, I wouldn't buy a house.
Yeah.
I'd buy a block.
Oh yeah, and that's what most people are doing. And like I said, and it's mostly Jewish people that are buying a lot of properties, and they even because they want to buy out the entire block. And a lot of the houses are still going really cheap. Cheap.
Cheap, right.
Cheap.
Absolutely.
And I think there's about 8,000 homes that are
Right.
still for sale in Trenton alone.
We got to take a short break. When we come back, you can finish answering him. Don't go away. Hit your share buttons. Ooh, I almost forgot to remind you. Hit your share buttons. Back in a minute. And we are back, getting into a good discussion here with Ruben about gentrification being a sort of a modern day example of the continuation
Right.
of how you push poor people out. Once you make them poor,
Right.
First you depress their housing, you make them poor, then you swoop in,
Right.
pick up that housing, call it gentrification, plant some poinsettias, and say, look how I've beautified the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I want to be specific in terms of how a neighborhood is devalued. It's not devalued by the color of people who move in it. It's devalued by the regulators who devalued it. And so the perception is people of color move into the neighborhood and the property value goes down. It goes down because the regulators make it go down. The banking institutions do that. So the color of a person doesn't necessarily make a neighborhood go down. The banking institutions do that intentionally. So, that's why I want to make sure that's clear.
Right,
Because
right.
there's been evidence to show that affordable housing doesn't lower property values in the neighborhood. It just doesn't.
Right.
But when they want to gentrify or urban renewal, the banking institutions, the regulators, intentionally devalue property.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what is, tell us, new topic for a second, because
Sure.
what does the Fair Share Housing Center like actually do? What's the day-to-day?
So our day-to-day is to make sure towns are following the law, particularly when it comes to when developers come into a town and a town wants to develop. That town and that developer knows, okay, they have to deal with Mount Laurel. So the developer says, I know if we're going to make sure we're going to do housing, luxury housing, condominium housing, or whatever housing it is, that 20% has to be affordable. That's what the law requires. So if I'm going to build market rate housing or luxury housing, well, 20% of it should be affordable. And that's for working class, that's for low income, very low income seniors, housing for special needs, homeless, and veterans.
Yeah, I hope. Thanks for driving that point home a second time. There are a lot of social service organizations designed to help people with special needs learn how to have independent living.
Absolutely.
This is not just a gift for Black folks. This is a gift for people who got hammered and need it, and they come in a lot of shapes and colors and proficiencies. So it sort of goes that way, and I hope we've also driven the point home that this affects everyone. If you think you're having a good time and driving a Beamer and living in the suburbs, you're paying for it. You're paying for all of this. So if you have no heart at all, look in your wallet and say, what do I have to do here, to fix this thing up? So it's essentially you're a watchdog agency.
We're a watchdog, and we like to think of ourselves as of creating a more inclusive New Jersey. Like New Jersey has, it's a very diverse state, but it's also a very segregated state. So we're trying to bring New Jersey to be more an integrated state, not just talk about its diversity. It's one thing to have diversity; it's another thing to have integration. Yeah. Those are two different things.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's an important distinction because, again, the perception and the reason why we have these towns who fight these issues because the perception is affordable housing for Black people, and that has some historical connotations of how Black people are projected historically in this country, how Black people are perceived in this country. So there's a targeted and intentional way how Black people are viewed in this country from history. So that goes always back to slavery and to the birth of the nation and creating this image of Black people. Like, for instance, we hear we have to do something about, or the Black community should do something about Black on Black crime. That is a white supremacist ideology to try to put in our heads that Black people are more violent than white people. So when you hear Black on Black crime, oh my God, yeah, Black people are, the communities are riddled with crime. But when there's mass shootings, like on Las Vegas or any other place, you don't hear people talk about, we got to do something about this white on white crime. So I tell people, stop talking about Black on Black crime until we talk about white on white crime.
Yeah, and in addition to that, Ruben, just following up on one of the points that you were making, I got to tell you, I walk down Trenton streets all the time.
Right.
And I don't get killed. I don't get mugged.
Right.
And sometimes people will look at me because sometimes I'm the only white guy and I stick out. And let's face it. But nobody. Maybe it's because I'm old now. I get a pass. Nobody, all this talk about how deadly it is.
Wait, not the whole entire city,
right?
Just certain.
Well, even certain parts that are considered more deadly than others. I mean, there are some things I do, like precautions I take. Like, for example, if I see commerce taking place, I don't get in its way.
Yeah.
People are doing the business that they have to do because they can't get a damn job.
Right. That's the issue.
That's why they're doing the business that they have to do. But they really are tough on each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Territory has meaning.
Right.
And so, I don't do that. I try not to be near a high school or middle school or something when it lets out.
Right.
Because all they do, they come flying out the door with nothing but testosterone. Right. And no.
Right, and these aren't symptoms of color. These are symptoms of social conditions.
Right.
If you concentrate poverty where there's no jobs and no opportunities,
So it's like a generational curse.
no, America celebrates organized crime. We make movies about it.
Yep.
That came out of a social condition where there was poverty, and that mafia took advantage of that.
Right.
We make movies and celebrate that, but all of a sudden, if it happens in a community that's predominantly black, oh, those people are violent.
It's a hypocritical system.
Yes, it's ridiculous, you know. So
Yeah.
that's you know,
I feel
The Sopranos, all these mob movies. We love that stuff.
Exactly. And actually, I want to say, I just want to brief into, and this will probably relate to what we're saying about the Black Wall Street.
Oh
you know?
yeah.
And that was just what 70 years ago, roughly.
Yeah, and most people don't know about that.
Yeah.
Share it.
And the whole thing was based. The whole city was liberated over a lie.
Right.
And the federal government did nothing about it. I think more the federal government helped the systematic of bombing, because even the next town was.
Yeah, say specifically what you're talking about. I'm sure our
I'm
listeners have
sorry.
no idea.
Well, back in the 1920s, development town in, I think it was in Kansas City,
Yes.
I believe, and they it was all
Oklahoma
black-
was another
Oklahoma,
area.
Oklahoma,
Oklahoma,
sorry.
yeah.
Oklahoma, I'm sorry. And it was a town. It was called, they called it the Black Wall Street. And in the Midwest at that time, between the 20s and the 40s, it was the most wealthiest town in the nation compared to New York. They had their own airport, bus and transit system, churches, school, banking, everything
Okay.
you would need for a community. And what happened was, and the whole town was leveled, leveled out, pretty much vanquished off the face of the earth
By what?
by the whites in the next town.
Like they blew it up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
literally.
literally.
Oh, they literally bombed it.
Literally bombed it.
Bombed it with planes.
Yeah.
Okay.
With planes. They literally bombed it with planes. No joke. And it was all based on because a white lady blamed a black guy for raping her.
Oh, and she was covering it up. I remember now. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was covering up an affair.
The
or
whites
something.
in the other town said
Yeah.
that we must, go
Retaliate.
and liberate this town. Now, this town, they had guns, they had their own police force and everything like that.
Yeah.
And what he found out later was that the town and this town wasn't literally next door, it was a few miles away
Yeah.
at that time. And the whole thing was based off a lie. So a lot of, blacks and whites died
Murdered.
for a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
destroyed.
Absolutely.
And the whole thing could have been, settled, like you said, without the prejudice and the racism.
Yeah.
Instead of saying wait, hold on a minute, something doesn't sound right here. No, people went with the lie. And I feel that, the federal government was involved in it because it was known that they didn't want to see this black community strive.
Right.
Yeah.
And they felt that the whites in next town were jealous because, these are blacks that came from slaves.
Right.
And you build this metropolis town
Yeah.
that was building, and you got a whole town.
Okay.
So,
All right, we got 3 minutes, and I got to get to this next
Okay,
one.
I'm sorry.
This is a conversation that you can go on
Yeah.
Forever.
drinks all night.
Right,
If we had the right liquor, we could be here all night talking about this.
Sorry.
So I'm in Trenton the other day, and I'm just sitting around a table with a bunch of brothers. It's me and one other white guy in the room, and everybody else. And they made fun of me. They told me I couldn't join a gang, and I said, why not? And they said, well, you'd be the only white guy. And I said, well, who's going to keep the books? Huh?
Right.
Who's going to do their tax return
Right,
if not
exactly.
me? So we're having this discussion, and we're talking about this and all of the other Band-Aids, that are required. I don't mean to minimize it with that term.
No,
but
that's
that's
it's
what they
serious.
are
Yeah.
compared to a root cause. Okay. And I said to them, I'm a product of the 60s, so tell me when is enough enough? When do we get our torches and pitchforks and storm the Capitol? And you know what? I noticed there's a difference between the black and white community, a very stark difference. The same way I can't walk around saying the N-word, they can't go up and be overly vocal
Right.
about this. Whether they're worried about consequences, like worse.
Yeah, life and death consequences.
Yeah, yeah, that worse stuff will happen. Or whatever the reason is, they cannot do it. They just can't. And so that's what I'm telling this story to our audience tonight, because I want you to understand that in order to fix this, in order to allow children to grow up in an environment where they can thrive, in order for us to be inclusive. I think of it as just to all work together towards a common goal, a common good. In order for us all to do this, white people have to pick up the charge. You have to do it. And anyone out there who wants to talk with me about this further, you can find me on Facebook. And I'm sure I'll get plenty of messages from people. But that's what has to happen here. We are going to have to take up this cause. We're going to have to, forgive the expression, but, well, no, I got a better expression. We're going to have to partner, with the African American community and be the first to demonstrate that we're stronger as a whole than the sum of our parts.
Yeah, and I think there's an alliance that needs to be created around, because the African American community know what they need to, how to heal their community. We just don't have access. We don't have access to the power and the resources to do so because America is run by white people. Now, I'm not saying that to minimize the white folks who have really helped the civil rights movement and who are still on the front lines today. And I'm not talking about white guilt. I'm talking about American history. One of the problems here in this country with white people, they don't know the history of how all these things came about. I think once we begin to educate people about how racism and segregation was intentional, created by the federal government, then people will say, oh, really? I did not know that my white family, generational wealth was created because the federal government set it up that way and then set it up that way and made sure blacks couldn't do the same thing. So that's the piece that's missing. Folks don't understand that the federal government, well, let me say this, the federal government, banking institutions, insurance institutions, education, all these institutions played a role in making sure that blacks weren't educated, didn't create wealth, all these things, and made sure white people were. So these things were intentional. And so I think it's about American history. Because this is not a secret, it's in books, we just don't talk about it.
And we're glad to bring that to you, because maybe we could start it right here, Reverend.
I hope so.
Reverend Eric Dobson. Oh, boy. We're going to take a 45-second break, and when we come back, I'll have some final words. Great job, man.
Oh, thank you, sir. Fantastic.
And we're back. The discussion continues off camera. I want to tell you, this is our last broadcast for this year, and it's been a truly remarkable year, both at Age Out Angels and on this program. On this program, I had the pleasure of interviewing Marcia Robinson Lowry, the probably preeminent child welfare attorney in this country. We got a lesson here about how the nurtured heart approach to work with young people. We presented over 50 organizations on this program this year, like the Trenton Circus Squad and Foster and Adoptive Family Services, New Jersey 211. And who can forget the teens who we had on twice from the Mill Hill Future Leaders program, who these teens planned a whole day event to try to destigmatize mental health as a means of suicide prevention. These are teens that suicide is affecting so deeply in their lives that they planned a whole day. I mean, that just spoke volumes to me. It underscores how, with all the issues confronting, the inner city, any of the issues they could have taken up in their cause, the one that spoke to them was teen suicide. We had callers who were foster alumni or lived in orphanages and group homes. And those experiences were not all bad. You know, the system it's not like the system is 100% broken. If you remember Mike from our earlier shows, who really had positive experiences in both, he lived in the last orphanage in Trenton and the foster family he lived with after they closed that. But generally, the stories that we heard from foster youth were a little leaning more towards the negative. Stories of youth who were victimized in their biological homes, then traumatized with removal from their biological homes, and then possibly victimized again, either while in the care of the child welfare system or on the streets after running away, or just after aging out. We also brought you news stories from across the countries that shed light on both successes and failures of the child welfare system. We learned that the number of youth in foster care is up to over 435,000 right now. And the increase for that is commonly associated with the opioid epidemic, and time will tell if that's actually the case. But wait until next year, famous baseball saying, right? Wait until next year. We have a story about lead in the environment next year that will make you think twice before you buy that quaint 100-year-old farmhouse you always dreamed about. We have a gentleman coming on next year who is bringing classical music to young people in downtown Trenton. We'll take a look at the doctrine created by the Trenton Prevention and Policy Board. It's a plan to end youth violence. A lot of good things in the works. We're going to bring them all to you. And I'm going to end the year by telling you about one last thing that you probably won't hear on the news tonight. Hanging around Trenton, I decided to do a little research, and I looked up Kwanzaa. And you should too. And I'll tell you why. You'll find, and it's spelled Kwanzaa, for those of you who don't know, okay? If you look it up, what you'll find is that it's actually quite a beautiful thing. And the interesting part about it is it was invented by a professor, I think, in the 1960s, in the late 1960s, who just invented it. And even though, you know, Hanukkah and Christmas have a biblical base, they were also invented by somebody too who turned it into the holiday, you know, who made it the thing. So it's okay, you know. But if you look up Kwanzaa, what you will find is that it has a universal application of good for everyone. You know, the only hesitancy I had in presenting this tonight was in case black folks said, "Oh man, he's taken the only last good thing we have this time of the year." You know,
Kwanzaa's great.
But it's really quite wonderful, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, damn it, because I want you to look it up. I want you to go on. You have a smartphone, you know, use it for something more than games. Look it up. Look up Kwanzaa. And the beautiful part about it is, when they figured this out, it comes in right the day after Christmas. Doesn't interfere with your Christmas, but you can keep the good faith rolling from Christmas, and it ends on New Year's Day. And it's like a perfect way to spend that week. And I'm not going to sell it to you anymore, but I want you to look it up, okay? The thing is, the best I can tell is people don't seem to say Happy Kwanzaa to each other unless two people know that each other celebrates it, right? Otherwise, it's Happy Holidays or Season's Greetings or Merry Christmas or whatever, but they don't say Happy Kwanzaa unless they're both in on it, so to speak. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another year, another hour, talking about root causes. This was great. I love this night tonight, because these things need to matter more in our political and economic discourse than they do. And we thank you so much for tuning in. I went a little over time. I'm sorry. I'll get out in just a second. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Again, we offer humble thanks to Hamilton Radio, to my most excellent guest, Rev Eric Dobson. Thanks to our engineer, Ruben. Music provided by Kurt Seldom-Ridge, owner-operator of the Cave Rehearsal Recording Space in Pennsylvania. Our webmaster is Carmen Garcia-Valera, and our social media specialist is Bailey Braverman. Join me 3 weeks from now. See you in 3 weeks. January 7th, my guest will be Catherine Mitch from Literacy, New Jersey. Until January 7th, God bless you all for caring about children. Have a great evening and a Happy New Year. Good night. Thank you so much.
the homeless on the holidays. 'Cause no matter how